The average American is spending over $1,000 a month just to own and insure a car. That's before gas, before the next repair, before the morning the check engine light comes on and a mechanic delivers news that costs more than the visit itself. For millions of people, that payment is simply the price of existing in suburban America. Unavoidable, invisible, and accepted without much question. But here's a number worth sitting with. $1,200 a month is also the total cost of living. Rent, food, utilities, healthcare, everything, in over a dozen beach towns scattered across the globe. Not bare minimum survival, not a shared room and a hot plate. Actual comfortable, walkable, oceanside retirement with money left at the end of the month. The towns in this video aren't obscure secrets. Some are well known, some are rising fast. A few are hiding in plain sight inside the United States, in corridors that retirement guides routinely overlook in favor of the same Florida markets that stopped being affordable years ago. What all 13 share is a single verifiable fact. The money most Americans are routing into a depreciating vehicle every month is enough to fully fund a real life near the water somewhere else. This is 13 of those places, broken down by real housing costs, what daily life actually looks like on the ground, and why each one works financially in ways that deserve more attention than they get. Some stay close to home, some require a passport and a willingness to rethink the blueprint entirely. All of them are legitimate, and the numbers behind each one are drawn from what the market actually shows in 2026. Not projections, not best case scenarios. A few of these will feel familiar, a few will feel unlikely, at least one or two will feel genuinely surprising. Not because the information is hidden, but because nobody ever puts it next to a car payment and makes the comparison explicit. Here are 13 beach towns where less than a car payment buys you a real retirement 2026. Pascagoula, Mississippi. Most retirement destination lists start with Florida. This one starts with a shipbuilding town on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and there's a specific reason for that. Pascagoula has something that Florida's coastal markets almost never have: price stability with a structural explanation. Major US Navy vessels have been built here for decades, and that industrial identity keeps the local real estate market from doing what beach-adjacent markets typically do when they get noticed: inflate rapidly, price out residents, and turn into something unrecognizable within a decade. The economy here isn't driven by leisure and speculation, it's driven by production, and that distinction matters enormously for anyone trying to lock in a long-term budget. Yet, the result is a one-bedroom apartment averaging around $824 a month in 2026. The national average for the same unit is $1,640. Pascagoula runs roughly 50% below that figure, and the Gulf Sound is still accessible. Mississippi does not tax Social Security benefits. For a retiree living on a fixed income, that policy quietly returns real money to every monthly budget without requiring any change in behavior. Combined with a cost of living that sits 15 to 20% below the national average, the financial picture here is unusually clean for a coastal location. The lifestyle isn't designed for attention. The Gulf Sound offers uncrowded water access, fishing that costs nearly nothing for residents. And the historic Round Island Lighthouse standing at the edge of town. There are no crowds because there's no marketing machine pointing people here. That's the point. And for the right retiree, it's the feature, not the flaw. Lake Charles, Louisiana. About 2 hours west along the Gulf Coast, Lake Charles is doing something that shouldn't logically be possible at this price point. The 7601 zip code consistently ranks as the most affordable place to live in Louisiana. Median home values sit around $88,000. Monthly rent runs about $925. Those numbers alone would make it worth including, but Lake Charles has something unusual layered on top of affordable baseline costs that changes the lifestyle calculus significantly. Two major casino resorts operate in this city: L'Auberge and the Golden Nugget. What that means for a retiree who has no interest in gambling is that the local dining and entertainment infrastructure is effectively subsidized by people who do. High-end restaurants, live performances, and hospitality facilities that a city of the 80,000 residents couldn't sustain on their own. All of it exists and remains accessible without paying resort prices to live nearby. The Charpentier Historic District adds texture that most affordable Gulf Coast communities simply don't have. 40 blocks of Victorian architecture that give the city a visual identity rooted in history rather than tourism development. The Creole Nature Trail extends 180 miles through wetlands that attract serious birdwatchers and wildlife photographers year-round. Fresh Creole food isn't a special occasion here. It's available everywhere because it's what the region has always cooked. For a retiree who wants genuine coastal affordability without sacrificing access to culture, quality food, or real amenities. Lake Charles makes an argument that's surprisingly hard to dismiss once the numbers are actually examined. Corpus Christi, Texas. Texas does not tax income. Any income, pension distributions, investment withdrawals, social security checks, none of it is subject to a state return because the state doesn't collect one. For retirees managing a fixed monthly budget, this isn't a minor footnote. It functions like a structural raise that doesn't require working more hours to receive. In Corpus Christi, that tax advantage layers on top of a city where average rent for a one-bedroom runs around $1,004, and the overall cost of living sits about 13% below the national average. That combination, zero state income tax plus below average base costs, gives the monthly budget a resilience that most coastal locations, even affordable ones, can't offer. The city sits on Corpus Christi Bay with direct access to Gulf Island's national seashore. Sailing is genuinely common here, not a luxury activity reserved for the wealthy. The weather stays warm for most of the year, and about 16% of the city's population is already retirement age, which means the medical infrastructure has grown to serve that population. Major hospitals and specialized senior services operate here because the demand exists at sufficient scale to support them. Medicare stays intact. Family proximity stays possible. The cost of living stays manageable. For a retiree whose priority list includes all three of those things simultaneously, Corpus Christi solves most of the equation within a single location. Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. There's a phrase that comes up repeatedly when people describe Bay St. Louis, and it surfaces often enough from enough different sources that it's worth unpacking directly. People call it Old Florida. What they mean is specific. This is what Florida's Gulf Coast looked like and felt like before it became expensive. Before the investment money arrived, before the short-term rental platforms reshaped the housing stock, before the boutique hotels replaced the fishing camps, oak-lined streets, white sand beaches, local art galleries operating in historic storefronts, a pace of life that hasn't been curated for visitors because the town was never primarily built for them. Rent averages around $909 a month. And median home values sit around $228,000, modest by any coastal standard and significantly below what comparable Gulf front communities in Florida are asking. The geography provides something beyond the town's own borders. Bay St. Louis is 1 hour from New Orleans. That proximity creates access to a major international airport for visiting family without paying New Orleans rent to live near it. It also means world-class medical specialists are within reach on the days a local clinic isn't sufficient, while the daily cost structure remains anchored to a small town, not a regional hub. The character here is genuine rather than performed. That's harder to find than it sounds on a coastline that has largely been discovered, developed, and converted into something more expensive. Saranda, Albania. Here's where the math starts to feel genuinely disproportionate. Saranda sits on the Albanian Riviera along the Ionian Sea. Greece is visible from the Albanian coastline on clear days. Not as a metaphor, but as a literal geographical fact. The watercolor is the same. The food culture, fresh seafood, olive oil, open-air produce markets, is not a budget compromise. It's simply what's available because it's what the land and sea here produce. A beachfront one-bedroom apartment rents for somewhere between $350 and $450 a month. Total monthly costs, rent, utilities, groceries, dining out several times a week, typically land between $830 and $1,220 for a single person. The $1,200 car payment threshold is the ceiling here, not the midpoint. American citizens can live in Albania visa-free for up to 1 full year with no initial proof of income required at entry. That makes Saranda an unusually accessible starting point for anyone considering international retirement without yet being ready to fully commit to it. Spend 6 months, establish what the actual costs are. The paperwork barrier to trying it is essentially non-existent, which is not something that can be said about most European retirement destinations. The daily texture of life in Saranda is built on small, repeated pleasures. A coffee along the coastal promenade for roughly $2. Fresh produce from markets where the selection reflects what's actually in season. But a town that moves at the speed of conversation rather than the speed of logistics and scheduling. There is no sophisticated case to make. The numbers are simply verifiable and what they buy is simply good. Vlorë, Albania. Saranda collects most of the international attention directed at Albania. Vlorë is where people who have actually spent significant time in the country tend to eventually land. Situated at the point where the Adriatic and Ionian Seas converge, Vlorë occupies a geography that's visually dramatic. Two distinct bodies of water meeting at a single coastline. Apartments within a block of the beach are available for around $300 a month. Private medical consultations with local physicians run between $30 and $65 out of pocket, without insurance involvement. The overall cost of living in Vlorë runs roughly 30% lower than in Saranda. That differential exists for a concrete reason. Vlorë sees fewer international tourists and has a smaller established expat population, which means the market hasn't been pulled upward by outside demand in the same way. It's more Albanian in daily character, which, depending entirely on what a retiree is actually looking for, is precisely the point. The surrounding region extends the retirement experience well beyond the coastline. Berat, a UNESCO World Heritage town, sometimes described as the town of 1,000 windows for its distinctive Ottoman-era architecture, is accessible from Vlorë. Logora National Park offers mountain terrain rising directly above the Adriatic coastline. The daily life available here has considerably more range than a beach town with low rent would typically suggest. For someone who found Saranda appealing but wants to spend less and engage more directly with the country itself, Vlorë is the natural progression rather than a compromise. Da Nang, Vietnam. A single retiree can live a genuinely comfortable life in Da Nang for somewhere between $730 and $980 a month. That figure covers a modern one-bedroom apartment with air conditioning and gym access, daily meals at local restaurants, and reliable transportation around a full-sized coastal city. Nothing about that budget requires sacrifice or cutting corners. Da Nang is the largest city in central Vietnam and functions as a legitimate regional medical hub. International standard hospitals, including Vinmec and Family Medical Practice, operate here and serve both local residents and the established expat population. Private health insurance offering comprehensive international coverage starts around $379 a month. Though many long-term residents use local hospitals directly at costs well below that figure, the daily rhythm of life in Da Nang is structured around abundance at low prices in a way that takes some adjustment to fully accept after years of US cost expectations. Meals at local restaurants run $2 to $3. A Grab, Vietnam's dominant ride-hailing service, costs roughly the same for a trip across the city. My K Beach, consistently rated among the best urban beaches in Southeast Asia, is a short ride from the city center. None of this is newly discovered. Da Nang has appeared near the top of international retirement rankings consistently enough that the expat infrastructure has matured to match the reputation. The difference between Da Nang and destinations that generate similar headlines is that the costs here are stable. The services are real, and the lifestyle doesn't require tolerating conditions that only feel acceptable because the rent is low. Dumaguete, Philippines. The Philippines runs a formal government retirement program administered by the Philippine Retirement Authority. Dumaguete on the island of Negros Oriental holds an official designation as one of that program's top hubs. That's not expat word of mouth. It's an institutional classification backed by a legal visa structure. The Special Resident Retirees Visa, the SRRV, provides indefinite residency in the Philippines. For qualifying retirees, the required deposit can be converted directly into a long-term lease or a condo purchase, meaning the financial commitment produces an asset rather than simply an entry stamp. Dumaguete is a university town, and that fact shapes the retirement experience in ways that matter practically. Salinas University generates a steady pipeline of trained and some English-speaking healthcare professionals who practice locally. A standard doctor's visit at Salinas University Medical Center costs as little as $12. The English language environment removes the communication friction that complicates healthcare access in many international retirement destinations. Total monthly costs for a single retiree in Dumaguete run around $805. Rent for a one-bedroom near the city center starts at around $200. The city carries an informal reputation, often described as the city of gentle people. that long-term residents consistently report as an accurate reflection of the social environment rather than promotional language. For a retiree whose primary concern is healthcare access, quality, affordability, and English language communication, Dumaguete delivers a combination that significantly more expensive destinations struggle to match. Sanur, Bali. Bali has two distinct versions of itself operating simultaneously, and they serve completely different populations. The version that generates the most content involves Canggu, villa rentals, co-working spaces, a transient population of short-term residents whose spending pushed rents up 15 to 20% in recent years. Sanur operates on a different logic entirely. It's flat terrain in a coastal setting, which matters more than it initially sounds for older retirees navigating daily life. The beach is calm rather than surf-driven. The neighborhood reflects the preferences of people who live there long-term, not people who arrived recently and plan to leave before the rainy season. A functional monthly lifestyle in Sanur, a small apartment or guest house, local warung food, a scooter for transportation, costs between $900 and $1,200. For someone comfortable at the $1,200 ceiling, a meaningfully upgraded version of that same life, including a private villa and international health coverage, becomes accessible at around $1,500. $300 above the benchmark. The honest complexity in Bali is the visa pathway. Long-term residency requires working through a social or business visa arrangement rather than a straightforward retirement visa. The process is less direct than the Philippines' SRRV and worth researching carefully before making commitments. That friction aside, Sanur is one of the few places where a $1,200 monthly budget produces a lifestyle that reads as genuinely restful rather than merely inexpensive. Salinas, Ecuador. When Ecuador adopted the US dollar as its national currency, it permanently eliminated one of the most persistent hidden risks of retiring abroad. Currency fluctuation, the mechanism by which a fixed retirement income can quietly lose purchasing power as exchange rates shift, doesn't exist here. A social security check arrives in dollars, gets spent in dollars, and the value is exactly what it appears to be every single month without monitoring exchange rates or adjusting budgets seasonally. Salinas is Ecuador's most developed Pacific beach resort, high-rise condos, a lively malecon, a boardwalk that fills with people in the evenings, restaurants operating at a variety of price points. Beachfront one-bedroom condos rent for $500 to $900 a month. Yet the total monthly costs for a single retiree land somewhere between $1,200 and $1,500, putting Salinas at the upper edge of this list's benchmark range. Ecuador's Tercera Edad law, third age, gives residents 65 and older a 50% discount on a wide range of public services, including transportation and international flights departing Ecuadorian airports. Public healthcare through Ecuador's IESS system costs around $85 a month for voluntary enrollees and accepts members regardless of pre-existing conditions. This is not a quiet, off-the-beaten-path retirement destination. Salinas is active, social, and built for people who want the full coastal town experience. For a retiree who wants ocean views, an engaged community, and the security of a dollarized economy. Okay, it delivers those things at roughly 60% of what equivalent coastal living would cost in the United States. Montañita, Ecuador. 45 minutes up the Ecuadorian coast from Salinas, Montañita is a completely different answer to the same underlying question. Where Salinas has high-rises, a polished malecon, and urban energy, Montañita has wooden casitas, consistent Pacific surf, and a community built around long-term residents who arrived, liked what they found, and quietly stayed. The rhythm here is slower and more deliberate. Less about amenity density, more about the quality of any given day. A furnished apartment runs $300 to $500 a month. Fresh ceviche made from the morning's catch is available at beachside stalls for about $3. The same dollarized economy that makes Salinas financially predictable applies equally here. No currency monitoring, no conversion math. Says no exchange rate surprises in either direction. In Montañita, the $1,200 monthly benchmark doesn't function as a ceiling. It functions as genuine breathing room. Most retirees here aren't pushing the limit. They're coming in meaningfully under it and holding the remainder. This is one of the few locations on this entire list where the car payment comparison tips entirely in the retiree's favor, not just theoretically, but in what actually lands in a bank account at the end of the month. The retiree Montañita suits is specific. Someone who who values proximity to nature, a real sense of community, and a health-forward lifestyle over the conveniences of city infrastructure. It's not designed for everyone. For the person it fits, the financial and lifestyle case here is almost impossible to argue against. Progreso, Mexico. Mexico's most prominent beach destinations, Tulum, Playa del Carmen, Los Cabos, have been discovered, heavily developed, and priced to reflect both of those things. Progreso on the Gulf of Mexico side of the Yucatan Peninsula has not followed that trajectory. It's a long beach, calm water town built around a lengthy pier and a community of people who actually live there year-round. 2- and 3-bedroom condos within walking distance of the beach rent for $700 to $900 a month. The overall cost of living runs 30 to 50% below comparable markets in the Riviera Maya, a gap that exists specifically because Progreso hasn't attracted the same volume of international development attention. And the safety question, which surfaces in some form in almost every conversation about retiring in Mexico, has a specific and verifiable answer in this context. Progreso sits close to Mérida, which is regularly cited among the safest cities in Mexico. The Yucatan Peninsula as a region carries a meaningfully different security profile than the Pacific Resort Corridor, and long-term residents in Progreso consistently describe daily life as genuinely calm rather than cautiously managed. The Gulf Coast location also gives Progreso a distinct physical and cultural character. The water is warmer and significantly calmer than Mexico's Pacific coastline. The regional culture reflects deep Mayan heritage that gives the area historical texture extending well beyond beach access. And the price structure here hasn't been reshaped by the decade of international investment that converted the Riviera Maya from an affordable coastal strip into a premium destination. For a retiree who wants Mexico but won't pay post-discovery prices to live there, the Yucatan Gulf Coast is the cleaner answer. San Juan del Sur, Nicaragua. Nicaragua consistently ranks as the most affordable retirement country in this entire comparison, and San Juan del Sur is where that affordability meets Pacific coastline directly. Long-term rentals negotiated directly with local landlords, the standard arrangement for established expat residents, are available for $300 to $500 a month. Total monthly living costs for a single retiree come in under $1,000. That's not the $1,200 benchmark, that's below it, with actual oceanside living included in the accounting. Nicaragua taxes foreign-sourced pension income at 0%, a social security payment, a pension distribution, investment income originating outside Nicaragua, none of it is subject to local tax. Well, the financial structure for a retiree living on foreign income is about as straightforward as it gets anywhere on this list. The lifestyle in San Juan del Sur is built around Pacific surf, fresh seafood, and an expat community that has been establishing itself here long enough to produce real social infrastructure. This isn't a destination that's being discovered right now. People have been retiring here for long enough that English-speaking neighbors are common, local services have calibrated to foreign resident needs, and the social calendar doesn't require effort to access. This is where the original comparison lands with the most direct force. The average American's monthly vehicle overhead, loan payment plus insurance, sure, before a single dollar of fuel or maintenance, runs between $992 and $1,143 for prime credit borrowers. The total monthly cost of living in San Juan del Sur is less than that figure. The car, in a purely numerical sense, costs more than the retirement. Two concrete policy shifts make 2026 a specifically favorable moment rather than a general observation about retirement economics. Social Security's cost of living adjustment increased monthly checks by 2.8% this year. A new enhanced deduction of $6,000 per individual, $12,000 for couples, was introduced for Americans 65 and older, reducing the federal tax burden on retirement income in a way that directly increases net monthly disposable income for people on fixed budgets. Neither of these changes is transformative in isolation. A 2.8% COLA increase doesn't turn an unworkable domestic retirement budget into a workable one. What it does, in locations where the base costs are already low, is add a genuine margin. In Pascagoula or Bay St. Louis, It nudges an already functional budget toward comfortable. In Da Nang or San Juan del Sur, it adds a buffer to a budget that was already covering everything without pressure. The 13 towns in this video span 4 continents, multiple languages, radically different climates, and a wide range of cultural environments. The Gulf Coast options preserve Medicare eligibility and family proximity. The international options trade those things for dramatically lower costs, tax efficiency, or both. Neither trade-off is objectively correct. They reflect different priorities, different family situations, different risk tolerances. What every location on this list shares is a price structure that consistently falls within the monthly range of what a single vehicle costs to own and insure in the United States right now. So that comparison isn't rhetorical decoration, it's the actual arithmetic. Verified, sourced, and applied to real markets in 2026. The beach was never the problem, the zip code was.